साधु साधुतादायन अतिनिचोच्चताकर हानमुंचकदाचिन माम निम्ना कंठयोस्पुरा। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। Okay, we'll continue. 2.8.24 to 2.9.3. Today, even if I complete before 8:30, I'll just stop it. I will not deal with Bhagavatarka Marichimala. Okay, text 24. भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। 624। सर्वमेतच्च भगवन् पृच्छतो मेनु पूर्वशः तत्त्वतोऽर्हस्युदाहर्तुं नृपन्नाय महामुने। O great sage, representative of the Lord, kindly satisfy my inquisitiveness in all that I have inquired from you, and all that I may not have inquired from you from the very beginning of my questionings. Since I am a soul surrendered unto you, please impart full knowledge in this connection. The spiritual master is always prepared to impart knowledge to the disciple, and specifically when the disciple is very inquisitive. Inquisitiveness on the part of a disciple is greatly necessary for the progressive disciple. Maharaj Parikshit is a typical disciple because he is perfectly inquisitive. If one is not very inquisitive about self-realization, one need not approach a spiritual master simply to make a show of discipleship. Not only is Maharaj Parikshit inquisitive concerning all he has inquired about, but he is also anxious to know about what he has not been able to inquire. Actually, it is not possible for a man to inquire about everything from the spiritual master. But the bona fide spiritual master is able to enlighten the disciple in every way for the disciple's benefit. Inquire about everything means inquire about everything that has some relationship uh, with Krishna Bhakti. Of course, Krishna Bhakti means any kind of Krishna Bhakti, any level of Krishna Bhakti that is presented in the Vedic scriptures. Bhakti Mishra Karma, Bhakti Mishra Jnana, Bhakti Mishra Yoga, Karma Mishra Bhakti, Jnana Mishra Bhakti, Yoga Mishra Bhakti, and Kevala Bhakti. Sadhana Bhakti, Bhava Bhakti, Prema Bhakti. Within Kevala Bhakti also. Text 25. Atra pramanam hi bhavan parameshthi yathatma bhu apare chanutishtanti purvesham purvajaihi kritam. O great sage, you are as good as Brahma, the original living being. Others follow custom only, as followed by previous philosophical speculators. Pramanam, samyak jata. You have complete knowledge. यतस्तव ब्रह्मन् नारद व्यास क्रमेण संप्रदाय अस्ति इति सामान्य न्यायेन आह. There is a disciplic succession that reaches up to you from Brahma to Narada to Vyasa sequentially. त्वदन्ये प्रायशः गतानुगतिका इव न तत्त्वविदः. Other than you, the others have simply come and gone. यतः आत्मभू श्री नारायण उद्भूतत्वात् तत्प्रकाशित ज्ञान. You are as good as Brahma, meaning Brahma is the self-born, is generated from Lord Sri Narayana. which means that his knowledge is directly manifested by Lord Narayana. And if Shukadeva Goswami were to say, uh, I have received knowledge from the Guru Parampara, this receiving knowledge through the Guru Parampara, that is there amongst other people also. But on top of it, you have directly received spiritual realization from the Supreme Lord. Nanu अन्येभ्येव ऋषिभिः सकाशात् त्वं पूर्वमेव अवगत एतत् सर्वार्थ एव भवसि. You have understood these things even before the other sages. तदपि किं मां पुनः पृच्छसि? So why are you asking me all these questions? The understanding that all these sages had received in the past, all of that you have received. So why are you asking me all these questions? Anticipating this question, this statement is made. अत्र तेषां सर्वेषामपि ऋषीणां मध्ये हि निश्चितमेव भवान् प्रमाण. You are the authority. You are the yardstick with which we evaluate everyone else, all other rishis. अतस्तत् अर्थ अभिज्ञः अपि अहं भवन्मुख पद्मात् कीदृदुत्तरम् आविर्भवतीति आकाङ्क्षायां पृच्छामि. So even though I am well experienced in the answers to all the questions that I'm asking, I'm asking these questions with the anticipation, while anticipating what kind of answers are coming out of your lotus mouth. यथा परमेष्ठी आत्मभू भगवत प्रसाद स्वतः सिद्ध वेदार्थ ज्ञानः. Just as Parameshti or Lord Brahma, the self-born, by the mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he attained knowledge of the import of the Vedas that is self-evident to the self-realized. Tatha Bhavan. That is the case with you also. Pare अन्ये तु पूर्वेषां पूर्वजैः विद्वद्भिरेव यद् यद् कृतं तत्तत् सर्वं दृष्ट्वा तेभ्यः अधीति अधीति अनुतिष्ठन्ति. The others, what do? They simply do what their predecessors have done, and they study whatever has been taught to them. They just carry out these things without that realization. That is the point. It may be argued that Shukadeva Goswami is not the only authority of perfect knowledge and transcendence, because there are many other sages and their followers contemporary to Vyasadeva, or even prior to him. There were many other great sages such as Gautama, Kanada, Jaimini, Kapila, and Ashtavakra. And all of them have presented a philosophical path by themselves. Patanjali is also one of them. And all these 6 great rishis have their own way of thinking, exactly like the modern philosophers and mental speculators. The difference between, to see what Siddhartha has said about this. The difference between the 6 philosophical paths put forward by the renowned sages mentioned above and the path of Shukadeva Goswami as presented in the Srimad Bhagavatam is that all the 6 sages mentioned above speak the facts according to their own thinking, but Shukadeva Goswami presents the knowledge which comes down directly from Brahmaji, who is known as Atmabhu, or born of and educated by the Almighty Personality of Godhead. These are all very fine explanation. Vedic transcendental knowledge descends directly from the personality of Godhead. By his mercy, Brahma, the first living being in the universe, was enlightened. And from Brahmaji, Narada was enlightened. From Narada, Vyasa was enlightened. Sukadeva Goswami received such transcendental knowledge directly from his father, Vyasadeva. Thus, the knowledge being received from the chain of disciplic succession is perfect. One cannot be a spiritual master in perfection unless and until one has received the same by disciplic succession. That is the secret of receiving transcendental knowledge. The six great sages mentioned above may be great thinkers, but their knowledge by mental speculation is not perfect. However perfect an empiric philosopher may be in presenting a philosophical thesis, such knowledge is never perfect because it is produced by an imperfect mind. Actually, in this Shad Darshana, the five darshanas, actually all the six of them, they claim to present the gist of the Vedas. What is the Veda teaching? That's how you have these different sutras, Nyaya, Vaisheshika, Sankhya, Yoga, and Karma Mimamsa and Brahma Mimamsa. For Brahma Mimamsa also there are materialistic interpreters. There is a long history of such materialistic misunderstanding of Brahma Mimamsa also. So they are all like thesis writers. Such great sages also have their disciplic successions, but they are not authorized because such knowledge does not come directly from the independent Supreme Personality of Godhead, Narayana. No one can be independent except Narayana. Therefore, no one's knowledge can be perfect, for everyone's knowledge is dependent on the flickering mind. Mind is material, and thus knowledge presented by mental speculators is never transcendental and can never become perfect. Mundane philosophers, being imperfect in themselves, disagree with other philosophers because a mundane philosopher is not a philosopher at all unless he presents his own theory. This was there in Vedic culture, that is there even in today's world also. Intelligent persons like Maharaj Parikshit do not recognize such mental speculators, however great they may be, but hear from authorities like Shukadeva Goswami, who is not different from the Supreme Personality of Godhead by the Parampara system, as is specially stressed in the Bhagavad Gita. It is also stressed in Srimad Bhagavatam. 26. Name savah parayanti brahman annashanadami pibato chitapiyusham tad vakyabhi vinisrutam. O learned Brahmana, because of my drinking the nectar of the message of the infallible personality of Godhead, which is flowing down from the ocean of your speeches, I do not feel any sort of exhaustion due to my fasting. See, these are all signs of extreme spiritual advancement. तव अशनद् द्विजकोपाभ्यां व्याकुलस्य कुतः श्रवणम्. Parikshit Maharaj anticipates that Shukadeva Goswami might ask him, you would be disturbed by not eating and by the anger of that twice born who has cursed you. So where is the question of hearing my answers and so on? Anticipating this, he speaks this verse. No, I'm not disturbed because I want to hear the nectar of the glory of the infallible Lord Achyuta. Yad anyat prishtam tadapi hare katham vina na kathayitavyam ityabhipretyaha name savaiti. I have asked you several questions. There are also questions which are other than those which are directly pertaining to Harikatha. Those questions should also be answered, should not be answered outside of Harikatha. With this in mind, he speaks the current verse. My life affairs have not gone away. They do not go away because of my fasting or by the curse of the twice born. And the reason for that, because I am drinking this nectar of the topics of Lord Achyuta. Anyatra, anyadatu, otherwise, tasmat api parayanti. My life affairs would have gone away. It is only because of this that I am intact. That is what he wants to convey. Chatra matkashta drishti karya. You should not consider me to be in a state of difficulty. If the implication is this, Kuptadvija, Saptamadivase, Takshakarumpodvijah ayasiti. Tasmat, anyatra iti tad agavane sati, asavaha para yasyanti eva. I know that on the seventh day from now, but because of that angry uh, twice born in the form of Takshaka, my life affairs would certainly go away. Tatascha, Achyuta Katha Piyusha Panam Aham Prapsyami. So then I will not be able to drink this nectar of Achyuta Katha at that time. Ataha Bhavata Krishna Kathayam Na Vilambaniyam. So you should not delay in this matter of Krishna Katha. This is the implication. The disciplic succession from Brahma, Narada, Vyasa, and Shukadeva Goswami is particularly different from others. The disciplic successions from other sages are simply a waste of time, being devoid of Achyuta Katha or the message of the infallible Lord. For instance, there is a concocted, stupid, so-called disciplic succession that is presented by the Mayavadis also. They also say Narada. No, they say Narayana, then Brahma, then Narada, then Vyasa, then Shukadeva Goswami, then Gaudapada, Govindapada, Shankarapada. This is their so-called disciplic succession. Where is Achyuta Katha? Where is the teachings of Srimad Bhagavatam, which present Vishnu Bhakti as the means and Vishnu Bhakti as the goal higher than the highest form of liberation also? That is the special, unique presentation of Sadhya and Sadhana in Srimad Bhagavatam. That is what is referred to as Achyuta Katha. That is not there. So it is simply a waste of time. The mental speculators can present their theories very nicely by reason and arguments, but such reasons and arguments are not infallible, for they are defeated by better mental speculators. Maharaj Parikshit was not interested in the dry speculation of the flickering mind, but he was interested in the topics of the Lord because factually he felt that by hearing such a nectarian message from the mouth of Shukadeva Goswami, he was not feeling any exhaustion. Exhaustion, that's the right word. Even though he was fasting because of his imminent death. One can indulge in hearing the mental speculators, but such hearing cannot endure for any length of time. One will be exhausted very soon from hearing such hackneyed ways of thinking, stereotyped ways of thinking. And no one in the world can be satisfied simply by hearing such useless speculation. The message of the Lord, especially from a personality like Shukadeva Goswami, can never be tiring, even though one may be exhausted from other causes. In some editions of Srimad Bhagavatam, the text of the last line of this verse reads, Anyatra Kupitadvijat, which means that the king might be overwhelmed by the thought of his imminent death by snake bite. The snake is also twice born, and its anger is compared to the cursing Brahmana boy who was without good intelligence. Maharaj Parikshit was not at all afraid of death, for he was fully encouraged by the message of the Lord. One who is fully absorbed in Achyuta Katha can never be afraid of anything in this world. 27. Tudo Vacha. Upamantrito Rajya Kathayam iti Satpatehe Brahmarato Bhrishamprito Vishnuratena Samsati. Tudo Goswami said, thus Shukadeva Goswami being invited by Maharaj Parikshit to speak on topics of the Lord Sri Krishna with the devotees was very much pleased. Acharya has given a very interesting quote from Brahma Purana. बाल्येऽपि स गुरुत्वेन मुनिभ्यः ब्रह्मणः यतः दत्तः अतः ब्रह्मरातेति नाम वैयासकेरभूत्. Vaiyasaki or Shukadeva Goswami was given the name Brahmarata because even in childhood he was made a guru to the sages by the arrangement of Lord Brahma. Upamantritah, Prishtah, Samscha Sau, Patishcha Tasya. Brahmana Shri Krishnena Rataha iti Brahma Vivartad Anusandheha. Jiva Goswami says that one should also consider that Shukadeva Goswami was directly protected by the Supreme Brahman, Sri Krishna, and therefore he is considered to be Brahmarata. Brahmarata literally means one who is protected by the Supreme Brahman. Vishnurata means one who is protected by Vishnu. Satpatehe, of the highest truth, refers to Krishna, Krishnasya. Krishnasya kathayam iti tat prashna uttaranam Krishna kathatve idam sutavakyam eva pramanam jayam. So this very statement of Suta Goswami is evidence that both the questions and answers were pertaining to Lord Krishna. Brahmarata is Shukraha. Srimad Bhagavatam can be legitimately discussed only among the devotees of the Lord. As the Bhagavad Gita was authoritatively discussed between Lord Krishna and Arjuna, the Lord and the devotee respectively. Similarly, Srimad Bhagavatam, which is a postgraduate study of the Bhagavad Gita, can also be discussed between the scholars and devotees like Shukadeva Goswami and Maharaj Parikshit. Otherwise, the real taste of the nectar cannot be relished. Shukadeva Goswami was pleased with Maharaj Parikshit because he was not at all tired of hearing the topics of the Lord and was more and more anxious to hear them on and on with interest. Foolish interpreters unnecessarily tackle the Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam when they have no access to the subject matter. There is no use in non-devotees meddling with the two top most Vedic literatures. And therefore, Shankaracharya did not touch Srimad Bhagavatam for commentation. In his commentation on the Bhagavad Gita, Sripad Shankaracharya accepted Lord Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But later on, he commented from the impersonalist view. Even there, let me see. Prabhupada has made an interesting remark. This is how Shankaracharya's commentary begins. Om Narayana Paravyaktad Andam Avyakta Sambhavam Andasyantastvime Loka Saptadvipacha Megini. Prabhupada quotes this repeatedly. Starts with this declaration. And then afterwards he says, Sa Bhagavan Srishtvedam Jagat Tasya Chasitim Chikishuhu Marityadin Agre Srishtva Prajapatin Pravritti Lakshanam Dharmam Grahayamasa Vedoktam. And after that, Supreme Personality of God had created this world and desiring to maintain this world, he first created Marichi and the other Prajapatis and caused them to accept the Vedic teaching of Pravritti Dharma, of Dharma that is characterized as Pravritti Marga. Tataha Anyancha Sanaka Sanandana Adin Utpadya Nivritti Lakshanam Dharmam Jnana Vairagya Lakshanam Grahayama Asa. Then afterwards, he generated Sanaka, Sanandana and the others. And he had them accept that dharma, which is characterized by jnana and vairagya, in the form of nivritti dharma. So Prabhupada refers to this. He says, see, Shankaracharya specifically refers to the four Kumaras here. But we know from Srimad Bhagavatam that the four Kumaras themselves, even though they were impulseless at one time, they gave up all that and became pure devotees of the Supreme Lord. Asya Ravindanayanasya Padaravindamakrananda. We will see that in third canto or fourth canto. The four Kumaras, they became attracted to the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord. Just as Shukadeva Goswami became attracted to the Supreme Lord after full liberation, the four Kumaras also became attracted to the Supreme Lord after full liberation. So Prabhupada also mentions that. So Shankaracharya, even though he was officially deputed to teach Mayavad, he could not help provide some hints about the real facts, even in the beginning of his commentary to Bhagavad Gita. But being conscious of his position, he did not comment on the Srimad Bhagavatam. Like Shukadeva Goswami was protected by Lord Krishna. See, Brahma Purana, and therefore he is known as Brahmarata. And Sriman Parikshit Maharaj was protected by Vishnu, and thus he is known as Vishnu Rata. As devotees of the Lord, they are always protected by the Lord. It is clear also in this connection that a Vishnu Rata should hear Srimad Bhagavatam from a Brahmarata and no one else, because others misrepresent the transcendental knowledge and thus spoil one's valuable time. 28. Praha Bhagavatam Nama Puranam Brahma Samhitam. Brahmane Bhagavat Praptam Brahma Kalpa Upagate. He began to reply to the inquiries of Maharaj Parikshit by saying that the science of the personality of Godhead was spoken first by the Lord himself to Brahma when he was first born. Srimad Bhagavatam is a supplementary Vedic literature, just in pursuance of the Vedas. Bhagavatakhyane naiva prashnanam uttaram dhatu upakrantavan. He proceeded to give answers by speaking on the Bhagavatam. Brahma kalpe brahmanaha janma upalakshite kalpe bhagavata sanksheprena praptam. This Bhagavatam was summarized by Bhagavan on that day of Brahma, which is characterized by Brahma's birth. Bhagavata Akhyanena Eva. Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur also confirms that he proceeded to give the answer on the basis of Bhagavatam itself. Brahma Kalpe, Sarvadhime Kalpe. This is the very first day of Brahma. Srimad Bhagavatam is a science of the personality of God. That's the impersonalist always tries to misrepresent the personal feature of the Lord, not knowing the science of this great knowledge. And Srimad Bhagavatam is in pursuance of the Vedas and scientific knowledge of the personality of God. To learn this science, one should take shelter of the representative of Sri Shukadeva and follow in the footsteps of Maharaj Parikshit without foolishly attempting to interpret, thereby committing a great offense at the feet of the Lord. The dangerous ways of interpretations by the non-devotee class of men have played havoc in understanding the Srimad Bhagavatam. And the careful student should be always alert in this matter if he at all wants to learn the science of Godhead. 29. Yadyat parikshit drishabha pandunam anupritchati anupurvyena tat sarvam akhyato upachakrame. He also prepared himself to reply to all that King Parikshit had inquired from him. Maharaj Parikshit was the best in the dynasty of the Pandus, and thus he was able to ask the right questions from the right person. Anupurvyena iti prastavakramah atra vivakshitah prashnakramah. Anupurvyena, from the beginning to the end. This refers to a systematic order. So Shukadeva Goswami decided to speak in a systematic order. Certain things he would speak uh, in third canto, certain things he would speak in fifth canto, certain things he would speak in 10th canto, certain things he would speak in 11th canto. It was all very clear in Shukadeva Goswami's mind. He is not following the order of the questions. And Jiva Goswami clarifies further. Bhagavat Kathaya eva anugataya praptena kramena. He spoke systematically on the basis of the topics pertaining to the Supreme Lord. Natu Raja Prashna was not like the questions of the king, Vyutkramena, which was out of sequence. Maharaj Parishit asked many questions, some of them very curiously, to know things as they are, but it is not necessary for the master to answer them in the order of the disciples' inquiries, one after the other. But Shukadeva Goswami, experienced teacher that he was, answered all the questions in a systematic way, as they were received from the chain of disciplic succession. And he answered all of them without exception. Chapter 9 answers by citing the Lord's version. Next one. Shri Shukavacha. Atmamayam Rite Rajan. Prabhupada had these verses memorized during his manifest presence. He trained some of his disciples to memorize, I think, the first 10 verses here. I'll tell you. Even now, there are some Prabhupada disciples who just like that, they'll be able to recite these verses. Shri Shukavacha. Atmamayam Rite Rajan. Rasyanubhavatmanah na ghatetartha sambandha swapna drashturivanjasa. Shukadeva Goswami said, O king, unless one is influenced by the energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, there's no meaning to the relationship of the pure soul and pure consciousness with the material body. That relationship is just like a dreamer seeing his own body working. This is, according to Madhvacharya, this is an answer to the question, how is it that the spirit soul, which is not made up of, which has no connection with the gross elements, to become related to these gross elements? The Jivatma brings about a body, even though it is not that body, because it is that arrangement is first of all caused by the will of the Supreme Lord. And without the will of the Supreme Lord, nothing happens. Raja Prashnottaram Vakshiyan Brahmane Harinoditam Kathayam Asa Navame Shukho Bhagavatam Punaha. So while desiring to answer the questions of the king, Shukadeva Goswami, he presented Kathayam. Oh. So Shukadeva Goswami spoke the Srimad Bhagavatam, which was actually spoken by Lord Hari himself to Brahma. This is presented in the 9th chapter. तत्र यत्तावदुक्तं यद् अधातु मतः इति अनेन जीवस्य कथं देह सम्बन्धः इति तत्रोत्तरम् आह आत्मनो हरेर्मायां Hmm. This is a complex issue. Atmana hare mayam antarena अनुभव रूपस्य आत्मना आत्मनोरथेन दृश्येन देहादिना सम्बन्धः अंजसा तत्त्वतः न घटेत. The soul does not become related to Maya. The soul is an experiencer, whereas the effects of Maya are all the body, which is the object of experience. So this arrangement comes about by Lord Hari. स्वप्न द्रष्टुर यथा स्वप्न देह संबंधः न घटते तद्वत्. Just as a dreamer has no relationship with the body that he uses in a dream. अनुभव रूपस्यापि जीवस्य यथा सम्मोहितो जीव आत्मानम् इत्यादि अनुसारेण मोहादि अनुपपत्तेः स्वरूपशक्त्या अनुभवित्वम् अपि. What is this? The Jivatma is an experiencer. And Jiva Goswami refers to Yatha Yaya Sammohita Jiva. Look like there's an improper it should be Yaya. Who is it Yatha? No. No. Ramasundar. Okay, what is our current verse? 9. Yaya. The living entity is bewildered by Maya, not otherwise. कृष्णस्य प्रथमस्य उक्त्वा द्वितीयस्य उत्तरं वदन् चतुश्लोकीं भागवत प्रवृत्तिं नवमे तनौ. Having answered the first question, now Sukadeva Goswami is presenting the answer to the second question. So in the 9th chapter, Sukadeva Goswami presents the dissemination of Srimad Bhagavatam in the form of Chatushloki. Jivasya deha sambandha nirhetuka sahetuka va. Is the jiva's relationship with the body having a cause or no cause? Tatra uttaramaha. He presents the answer. Atmanaha harehe mayam anadya vidya shaktim antarena अतः देहेन्द्रिय आदिभिः संबंधः जीवस्य न घटते. It is not possible for the jiva to have a relationship with the body, senses, and other material objects without the beginningless potency of ignorance in the form of Maya belonging to the Supreme Soul, Hari. यथा स्वप्न दृष्टुर अज्ञानमृते स्वाप्निक देह संबंधः न घटते. Just as a dreamer, there's no possibility of a dreamer having a relationship with the dream body other than ignorance. यतः अनुभवात्मनः ज्ञानमयस्य तथा देहादिभ्यः परस्य मायया तु अचिन्त्यशक्त्या दुर्घटनापटीयस्या देहसम्बन्धः घटते इत्यर्थः. Even though the Jivatma is Anubhavatma, is filled with awareness, still it is by the Lord's Maya potency, which is an inconceivable potency which can make the impossible possible. It is only that by that there is a relationship with the body. And you'll see how Prabhupada explains this in a very fine manner. Maharaj Parikshit's question as to how a living entity began his material life, although he is apart from the material body and mind, is perfectly answered. The spirit soul is distinct from the material conception of his life, but is absorbed in such a material conception because of being influenced by the external energy of the Lord called Atma Maya. This has already been explained in the first canto in connection with Vyasadev's realization of the Supreme Lord and his external potency. The external energy is controlled by the Lord. The living entities are controlled by the external energy by the will of the Lord. See, that is important because the question arises, the living entities are conscious. As such, they are superior to matter, which is unconscious. Maya is matter. So, how is it possible for something superior to become bewildered by something inferior? So, that is happening by the will of the Lord. Therefore, although the living entity is purely conscious in its pure state, he is subordinate to the will of the Lord in being influenced by the external energy of the Lord. In the Bhagavad Gita 15.15 also, the same thing is confirmed. The Lord is present within the heart of every living entity, and all the living entities, consciousness and forgetfulness are influenced by the Lord. Now, the next question automatically made will be, why the Lord influences the living entity to such consciousness and forgetfulness? The answer is that the Lord clearly wishes that every living entity be in its pure consciousness as a part and parcel of the Lord, and thus be engaged in the loving service of the Lord as he is constitutionally made. But because the living entity is partially independent also, he may not be willing to serve the Lord, but may try to become as independent as the Lord is. All the non-devotee living entities are desirous of becoming equally as powerful as the Lord, although they are not fit to become so. The living entities are illusioned by the will of the Lord because they wanted to become like him, like a person who thinks of becoming a king without possessing the necessary qualification. When the living entity desires to become the Lord himself, he is put into a condition of dreaming that he is a king. Therefore, the first sinful will of the living entity is to become the Lord. And the consequent will of the Lord is that the living entity forget his factual life and thus dream of the land of utopia, where he may become one like the Lord. The child cries to have a moon from the mother, and the mother gives the child a mirror to satisfy the crying and disturbing child with the reflection of the moon. Similarly, the crying child of the Lord is given over to the reflection, the material world, to lord it over as a karmi and to give this up in frustration to become one with the Lord. One is the stage of karma, the other is the stage of jnana. Both these stages are dreaming illusions only. There is no necessity of tracing out the history of when the living entity desired this. But the fact is that as soon as he desired it, he was put under the control of Atma Maya by the direction of the Lord. Therefore, the living entity in its material condition is dreaming falsely that this is mine and this is I. The dream is that the conditioned soul thinks of his material body as I, or falsely thinks that he is the Lord and that everything in connection with the material body is mine. Thus, only in dream does the misconception of I and my persist life after life. This continues life after life, as long as the living entity is not purely conscious of his identity as a subordinate part and parcel of the Lord. In his pure consciousness, however, there is no such misconceived dream, and in that pure conscious state, the living entity does not forget that he is never the Lord, but is eternally the servitor of the Lord in transcendental love. It's true Bahurupa iva bhati maya bahurupaya ramavano guneshwasya mamaham manyate. The illusion living entity appears in so many forms offered by the external energy of the Lord. While enjoying in the modes of material nature, the encaged living entity misconceives, thinking in terms of I and mine. Samsaropi mayaya eva ityaha. The conditioned soul's experience of matter. Samsara refers to material experience. The Vallabhites, they stress that there is a distinction between samsara and jagat. Jagat is the material world, and samsara is the conditioned soul's experience of jagat. Of course, experience with the sense of aham mama. Bahurupa, Bala Yuvadi Rupaha, Devan Naradi Rupascha Abhati. The living entity appears to be of many forms, as a child, as a youth, and so on, as a deva, as a human being, and so on. Guneshu, Dehadishu, uh, the Ramana Guneshu, in the modes of different qualities, while enjoying in the modes of material nature. These modes refer to the products of modes of material nature, which refer to the material body and so on. एवं यादृच्छ या अविद्याशक्त्या एव देह संबंधे सति जीवः कीदृशः स्यात्. So if somehow or other the living entity has a relationship by the Supreme Lord's ignorance potency, then what is the situation of the Jivatma? Ityapekshayamaha. Anticipating that, Sukadeva Goswami speaks this verse. Bahurupa. Jivasya chitkana rupatvat na tatvata ityartha. The Jivatma has a form as a spiritual particle in reality. So all of these multiple forms of the living entity, that is not reality. Bahurupaya, Jivasya, Bahurupatva hetutvad bahuvrittikaya. Bahurupaya. Maya appears in multifarious forms because she is the cause of the Jivatmas having multiple Mayic forms. So she presents herself in so many aspects. Yaya Kshetra Shakti Sa Taratamyena Vartate. The living entities in material existence, they are there in a state of gradation. In different forms of the living entities, are different dresses offered by the illusory external energy of the Lord. According to the modes of nature, the living being desires to enjoy. The external material energy is represented by the three modes, namely goodness, passion, and ignorance. So even in the material nature, there is a chance of an independent choice by the living entity. And according to his choice, the material energy offers him different varieties of material bodies. There are 900,000 varieties of material bodies in the water, 2 million vegetable bodies, 1,100,000 worms and reptiles, 1 million forms of birds, 3 million different bodies of beasts, and 400,000 human forms. Altogether, there are 8,400,000 varieties of bodies in different planets of the universe. And the living entity is traveling by so many transmigrations according to different modes of the enjoying spirit within himself. Even in one particular body, the living entity changes from childhood to boyhood, from boyhood to youth, from youth to old age, and from old age to another body created by his own action. The living entity creates his own body by his personal desires. and the external energy of the Lord supplies him the exact form by which he can enjoy his desires to the fullest extent. The tiger wanted to enjoy the blood of another animal, and therefore, by the grace of the Lord, the material energy supplied him the body of the tiger with facilities for enjoying blood from another animal. Similarly, a living entity desiring to get the body of a demigod in a higher planet can also get it by the grace of the Lord. And if he is intelligent enough, he can desire to get the spiritual body to enjoy the company of the Lord, and he will get it. So the minute freedom of the living entity can be fully utilized, and the Lord is so kind that he will award the living entity the same type of body he desires. The living entity is desiring is like dreaming of a golden mountain. A person knows what a mountain is, and he knows also what gold is. Out of his desire only, he dreams of a golden mountain, and when the dream is over, he sees something else in his presence. He finds in his awakened state that there is neither gold nor a mountain, what to speak of a golden mountain. The different positions of the living entities in the material world under material manifestations of bodies are due to the misconception of my and I. The karmi thinks this world is mine, mamata, and the jnani thinks I am everything, ahanta, the I-ness and minus. The whole material conception of politics, sociology, philanthropy, altruism, etc., conceived by the conditioned souls, is on the basis of this misconceived I and mine, which are products of a strong desire to enjoy material life. Identification with the body, in the place where the body is obtained under different conceptions of socialism, nationalism, family affection, and so on and so forth, is all due to the forgetfulness of the real nature of the living entity. And the whole misconception of the bewildered living entity can be removed by the association of Shukadeva Goswami and Maharaj Parikshit, as all this is explained in the Srimad Bhagavatam 3. Yarhi Vava Mahimni Swe Parasmin Kala Maya Yoh Rameta Gadasamohas Yakko Daste Tado Bhayam. As soon as the living entity becomes situated in its constitutional glory and begins to enjoy the transcendence beyond time and material energy, he at once gives up the two misconceptions of life, I and mine, and thus becomes fully manifested as the pure self. अतएव भक्ति योगेन तन्निराशे सति मोक्षः अपि घटते इति आहयर्हि. Therefore, when one engages in bhakti yoga and destroys this experience of matter, then it is possible for there to be liberation. This has already been explained earlier on. And he quotes 1.7.5-6. Sridhar Swami is very, very consistent in explaining the Bhagavatam. No. Sve mahim, swasyam mahima hetav. He shines in his own glory. Alamaya parasmin tattva dadi sarvashraya tattva. Mameva ye prapadyante mayam etam tarantite iti Shri Gitataha. So when he surrenders unto Lord Shri Krishna, then he is able to cross over Maya. Prigitir nayavan maivasudeve namuchyate deha yogena tavat iti Rishabhadeva Vakyacha. All was stated by Lord Rishabhadeva, 5.5.6. As long as one does not attain love for me, Lord Vasudeva, he is not liberated from the connection with the body. But when he is liberated, then he is actually free from both. He is free from Maya and he is free from the various items in the form of the body and so on. Evam cha yadrikshik या मायया एव जीवस्य संसारः यथा तथैव यादृच्छिक्या भक्त्या एव जातप्रमणा जीवस्य संसारान् विस्तार. Just as somehow the Jivatma's experience of matter in the form of samsara takes about by Maya, similarly, somehow, when the Jivatma uh, develops his love for Krishna, then there is deliverance from samsara by bhakti. स्वीये महिम्ने रमेत वस्तुतः खलु स्वीय देहादिके ममतास्पदे रमणं त्यक्त्वा यथार्थत एव स्वीये ममतास्पदे वस्तुनि इत्येव. He gives a his sense of I-ness and my-ness, ahanta and mamata. He gives up trying to find pleasure from all of these, and he finds happiness in himself and in whatever actually belongs to him. Mahimatishayatvat mahimarube. And he is fully glorious in that position. What kind of position? That position which is beyond Kala and Maya. It means it is beyond the degrading transformations created by the force of time. And it is beyond his own constitutional nature, is beyond the different elements such as Mahatattva, which are actually products of Maya. So he finds happiness in his true self. तच्च न यत्र काले इति न यत्र माया इत्यादि वक्ष्यमाणवाक्य दृष्ट्या भगवतः धाम श्री विग्रह पार्षदादिकं ज्ञेयम्. So one should understand that this is a reference to the Supreme Lord's abode, the Supreme Lord's sacred form, his associates, and so on. So he considers these to be mama, mine. He does not consider his body, the children born from his body, and so on, to be his. He considers the Supreme Lord's abode, the Supreme Lord, his associates, and so on, to be his. This is understood from statements that will appear, and that will be spoken, because it will be pointed out that in the Vaikuntha atmosphere, there is no time, there is no Maya. Ramanasya bhaktya vina bhavitva yadrichaya praptaya bhaktya iti labhyate. And that relishing of pleasure does not take place without bhakti. Tada abhayam kalam tato udaste anasakto bhavati. Two misconceptions of life, namely I and mine, are verily manifested in two classes of men. In the lower state, the misconception of mine is very prominent, and in the higher state, the misconception of I is prominent. In the animal state of life, the misconception of mine is perceivable even in the category of cats and dogs who fight with one another with the same misconception of mine. In the lower stage of human life, the same misconception is also prominent in the shape of it is my body, it is my house, it is my family, it is my caste, it is my nation, it is my country, and so on. And in the higher stage of speculative knowledge, the same misconception of mine is transformed into I am, or I am all, etc. There are many classes of men comprehending the same misconception of I and mine in different colors. But the real significance of I can be realized only when one is situated in the consciousness of I am the eternal servitor of the Lord. This is pure consciousness. And all the Vedic literatures teaches this conception of life. The misconception of I am the Lord or I am the Supreme is more dangerous than the misconception of mine. Although there are sometimes directions in the Vedic literatures to think oneself one with the Lord, that does not mean that one becomes identical with the Lord in every respect. Undoubtedly, there is oneness of the living entity with the Lord in many respects, but ultimately the living entity is subordinate to the Lord. He is constitutionally meant for satisfying the senses of the Lord. The Lord therefore asks the conditioned souls to surrender unto Him. And the living entity is not being subordinate to the supreme will, why would the living entity be asked to surrender? And the living being being equal in all respects, then why was he put under the influence of Maya? We have already discussed many times that the material energy is controlled by the Lord. The Bhagavad Gita 9.10 confirms this controlling power of the Lord over the material nature. Can a living entity who claims to be as good as the supreme being control the material nature? The foolish I would reply that he will do so in the future, even accepting that in the future one will be as good a controller of material nature as a supreme being. Then why is one now under the control of material nature? The Bhagavad Gita says that one can be freed from the control of the material nature by surrendering unto the Supreme Lord. But if there is no surrender, then the living entity will never be able to control the material nature. So one must also give up this misconception of I by practicing the way of devotion service and becoming firmly situated in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. A poor man without any employment or occupation may undergo so many troubles in life. If by chance the same man gets a good service under the government, he at once becomes happy. There is no profit in denying the supremacy of the Lord, who is the controller of all energies, but one should be constitutionally situated in one's own glory, namely to be situated in the pure consciousness of being the eternal servitor of the Lord. In his conditioned life, the living entity is the servant of the illusory Maya, and in his liberated state, he is the pure, unqualified servant of the Lord. To become untinged by the modes of material nature is the qualification for entering into the service of the Lord. I will read that again. To become untinged by the modes of material nature is the qualification for entering into the service of the Lord. As long as one is a servant of mental concoctions, one cannot be completely free from the disease of I and mind. The supreme truth is uncontaminated by the illusory energy because he is the controller of that energy. The relative truths are apt to be engrossed in the illusory energy. The best purpose is served, however, when one is directly facing the supreme truth, as when one faces the sun. The sun overhead in the sky is full of light, but when the sun is not in the visible sky, all is in darkness. Similarly, when one is face to face with the Supreme Lord, he is free from all illusions, and one who is not so is in the darkness of illusory Maya. The Bhagavad Gita 14.26 confirms this as follows. Mam chayo vyabhicharena bhakti yogena sevate saguna samati dyaita brahma bhuyaya kalpate. So the science of Bhakti Yoga, of worshipping the Lord, glorifying the Lord, hearing the Srimad Bhagavatam from the right sources, not from a professional man, but from a person who is Bhagavatam in life, and being always in the association of pure devotees, should be adopted in earnestness. One should not be misled by misconceptions of I and mind. The karmis are fond of the conception of mind, the jnanis are fond of the conception of I, and both of them are unqualified to be free from the bondage of the illusory energy. Even Bhagavatam and primarily the Bhagavad Gita are both meant for delivering a person from the misconception of I and mind. Vyasadeva transcribed them for the deliverance of the fallen soul. The living entity has to be situated in the transcendental position where there is no longer any influence of time or the material energy. In the conditioned life, the living entity is subjected to the influence of time in the dream of past, present, and future. The mental speculator tries to conquer the influence of time by speculating about becoming Vasudeva or the Supreme Lord in the future by means of culturing knowledge and conquering over ego. But the process is not perfect. The perfect process is to accept Lord Vasudeva as the supreme in everything. And the best perfection in culturing knowledge is to surrender unto him because he is the source of everything. Only in that conception can one get rid of the misconception of I and mind. Both the Bhagavad Gita and the Srimad Bhagavatam confirm this. Vyasadeva has specifically contributed to the illusion living entities, the science of God and the process of Bhakti Yoga in his great literature Srimad Bhagavatam. The conditioned soul should fully take advantage of this great science. Astonishing. Prabhupada explanation. Okay. Okay. Achyutanam Prabhu.
Prabhu, I had question from yesterday's shloka in 2.8.21, where this analogy of soldier in battlefield and preaching was given. So, how to protect ourselves from Jana Sangha, like when we are meeting others who are not devotees and trying to tell them about Krishna consciousness? So, to what degree is our boundary so that I don't
See,
get into
just
problem?
as chanting is a process, it's a particular process. If we don't follow that process, then the same process will increase our Maya. Similarly, that applies for all the different items of Bhakti Yoga. So there's a process of how to preach. Therefore, we should examine how Prabhupada, how he arranged for preaching to take place. What elements were there, what were not there. Similarly, one can check how Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur organized the preaching. Preaching means without compromising our purity, we want to increase the number of persons who have taken to Krishna Bhakti. That is the whole idea. We need to progress, but at the same time, without compromising our spiritual progress, we should introduce others to Krishna consciousness and help them also make spiritual progress. So there's a method for it. It's not simply just chanting. There's a process of chanting. There's a process of preaching. The process of chanting means, like for instance, Prabhupada has given us uh, minimum 16 rounds. We chant on beads. We pronounce the holy names. We chant a particular mantra containing the holy names. There are 10 offenses. We try to avoid them. There are sinful activities. There are seva aparad. There are other items to do which help us in our chanting. So like that, there's a complete mechanism for it. So one has to learn the science of practice. One has to learn the science of preaching. All of it put together is what will produce a result. The Upadeshamrita is a fine presentation of, it's a very concise presentation of all the elements that are required for the practice to take place properly. Everything there is important. It's a precision mechanism. Just like in a car, you press the accelerator, you go fast. You press the brake, you stop. They're just next to each other. So if you are driving in a road and you see some small child crossing the road, and instead of pressing the brake, you press the accelerator, you create disaster. So like that, there's a particular mechanism. So all of that should be learned in the association of those who are more advanced in Krishna consciousness. That means they're more advanced in Vairagya Vidya Bhakti. So having an association like the International Society for Krishna Consciousness is very helpful because you can scan around and you can see those who have produced better results and can start thinking how to associate with them. They may be not in places like Mayapur and they may be somewhere else. And that is not the point. You can start thinking, you can start considering how is it that they are able to make this amount of spiritual progress, that they are not affected by Maya. You can ask them questions because they have shown results. These things have to be considered. Okay. Okay. Pacha Kalpataru Vaishnava Prasadibhya Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavabhyo Namaha.